You know those cash counters that you see at like the bank? You know, they can put like a stack of money and it's like, "Grrr," and it pulls it through and it says, these are, you know, of these bills, or these are 30 of these bills, or whatever. Like you can sort it into all kinds of things. Those cash counters now, they actually scan serial number of every bill. And they keep a database of every serial of every bill that they scan, even when they're going by, like, you know, 130 seconds. And guess what those cash counters are now? Yeah, they're networked, right? And so this is the thing. The same thing is happening to our postal mail. The USPS in the United States, they photograph addressing information for every piece of mail now they process. And these are just the challenges that we face, right? They see it as metadata. Like maybe they don't know what you spent that money on, but they know that that cash was deposited by this person at this bank, eventually, this business. And the last time that the system writ large saw this bill was over in this state or that, and it was withdrawn by this person at that time. And we have no idea how the federal government is using these programs. We have no idea how the banks are using the programs to perform sort of surveillance and link analysis of how certain financial flows occur. But then, as you say, then we get cryptocurrency. Now, cryptocurrency, and by this I'm just going to say Bitcoin, is really failing comprehensively, terribly on the privacy angle. And I've said this again, and people are like, oh, Taproot, look at what Taproot actually does. Taproot does not fix Bitcoin's privacy problem. And there's some arguments that it makes it worse by this sort of fragmented address space, making forensic sort of flow analysis easier because you can spend a wallet is using an ancient address. They sent a payment to this new person with a new form of address, right? But the change address went back to the old one. So even though there's one input, two outputs, you can tell one was a payment and one was a sort of a refund or a change event. Shouldn't be like that. There's no reason for it to happen. We see so many different privacy clones. Zcash, I have said repeatedly, really does the best in this space with their shielded transactions. The criticism is that like, these transactions don't occur by default, which is valid. In my opinion, they should happen by default. There are other cryptocurrencies like Monero, privacy code, which is having a lot of trouble being listed on exchanges broadly, which has sort of privacy by default, but it's a lower measure of privacy. They're just playing a shell game. And those shell games really don't last forever, particularly as technology does better and better. And we haven't seen legally tested in the kind of way that we want to see it done. But they're both great projects, and there are many, many other privacy coins out there. But like you said, we see exchanges starting to go privacy. That's scary. The way that you fix this, the way that you normalize this, is you make Bitcoin private, right? And I mean the main chain. I'm not talking about putting on layer 2. I'm not saying lightning shenanigans, right? You have to make the idea cryptocurrency is private by design. And once you normalize that, it's fait accompli. And it's really frustrating, I think, for a lot of people in space that the core development team for Bitcoin has not prioritized this, because the longer they wait, the more obstacles are going to be put in place to prevent that from being the case. Right now, Bitcoin really can't be delisted by exchanges. And the sooner we take advantage of that, the better off we will be. And this was never the norm historically. A lot of this flew out of like September 11th with like counterterrorism financing. And like counterterrorism financing at like Bank of America, like we want terrorists to be sending financial flows over Bank of America, because then we know what they're doing. We know who it's going to. We can knock on their door and like we can blow up their house, right? The way we deal with these things is really crazy, because we structured these new policies in the panic. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in there. But I think it's important. Actually, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that. When did these things just start to change from this old paradigm things were in terms of what the government could get from banks and what they can get from right? It's no longer your record, it's the bank's record. So the government doesn't need a warrant or anything like that, because the bank can voluntarily. Yeah, I mean, I think it's strategic. I think if you asked a lot of these people privately, they would all say they hate it. They would all say it's a mistake. They would all say they don't do it. But at the same time, I think a lot of these guys are not comfortable being the first to break cover, and they're afraid of regulation, right? The problem with the cryptocurrency space at the largest scale today is the people who make these decisions have the biggest stake in the system, and the system has benefited from the fact that it has not been regulated out of existence, or there's no attempt to regulate it out of existence currently by the structures as it exists today, and so they have become fantastically wealthy. And this puts a lot on the line, right? I'm not saying they have no principles. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm saying they realize how much value there is both for themselves and for everybody else who's bought into these systems by not rocking. And it's important to remember that sometimes the boat can be bigger than the puddle. And right now, they're all afraid of being, capsized and drowned in the ocean. But there is, like right now, they're in a puddle and there's a rainstorm out there. And the puddle's getting bigger. And I think they need to understand that it's important to establish these things before the idea that KYC everywhere for everything. We move these. You take something off the exchange, and the exchange says, well, you need to identify who owns that wallet. And you need to identify where this came from. You need to identify, where you got these funds from, because again, like Bank of America can do this to somebody, and they have done this since September 11th. Well, September 11th is not the precedent. That's not the world that we want to live in until the end of time. That's not going to change unless somebody makes a change. The idea of the Bitcoin protocol, the peer-to-peer electronic cash system, is the idea that we can send these payments to anyone permissionlessly. And this is true if it's in your wallet. But how do people fill their wallets? They get it through exchanges. And these guys are imposing permissioning steps that are intermediary to the transaction. And the only way to defeat that is to allow some kind of purification step, right? Where we remove all of the taint, we remove all of the identification, we remove all of the cruft being imposed at this external level, this external layer in the system, and return it to this idea that we can have direct trade, we can have direct commerce, we can have direct interaction with anyone, anywhere, time. Until we recognize that and realize that and enforce that, or at least provide opportunity through the protocol level, crypto hasn't gotten to where it needs to be. Yeah, I mean, there's so many problems that, like, even if we step away from privacy, we know China is trying out their digital yuan, and the idea, like the hot, exciting idea that was being written about on like Bloomberg on this, is that they could issue money that has an expiration date because it's digitally provided, right? They can set the rules on this. They own the wallets, they distribute this, the tokens they create, they can script however they want. And so they go, well, for economic stimulus, we can give a payment, and if you don't use it, you lose it. But simply the idea that anyone anywhere can revoke your money is terrifying. How can anyone say, we're all going back to gold at that point, like digging in the ground and like burying acorns in the forest like squirrels? There's actually an argument to be made for people doing that for thousands of years. That's why sometimes you find caches of buried coins under some house in England. It's because people recognize, for good reason, you have to be able to store value somehow that can't be confiscated, because confiscation is not always just, even if it is legal. And just to respond a little bit to the Hong Kong thing, I think that's a great point, but it also shows where we are really bad at anticipating threats, and we're very bad at scanning things. You go to the subway and you don't want to use cash because you don't want your ticket to be associated with your card that says you went to this protest at this time. Great, makes sense, good idea. At the same time, you're carrying your phone, and there are cell phone towers at the protest site because there's cell phone towers everywhere in the city. And your phone is associated with your SIM card. Your SIM card is associated with a telecommunications company. The telecommunications company associates that with your payment information. The phone company still knows you were at that protest site.